All right, so welcome back everybody to the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute Data Science Zoominars. We were off for a month because we had regular talks. I hope some of you came and enjoyed those. But today we're back with the Zoominars, and we're very fortunate to have with us DuBois Bowman. I met DuBois, I don't know what it was, 20 years ago, maybe 15, when he was faculty at Emory Biostat Department, and he was working on brain imaging. And he came to visit Hopkins when I was there. So that's when I first met him. And ever since then, we've seen each other every once in a while at meetings and stuff and talk statistics and also administration, which is some of what I want to talk about today. But first, a little bit of introduction. His research has helped reveal brain patterns that reflect disruption from psychiatric diseases, that detect biomarkers for neurological diseases, and determine more individualized therapeutic treatments. Additionally, his work seeks to determine threats to brain health from environmental exposure and optimize brain health in aging populations. He then became the chair of the Department of Biostatistics at Columbia University, where I know he recruited several faculty members, grew that department, and many of them are succeeding now. And I think that success led him to be recruited to be the dean of the University of Michigan School of Public Health. He's the actual dean, not an associate dean. So he's one of the few biostatisticians that have become deans and has been there for the last several years. Is it what is it now? 3 years?
Year two,
Year
just
two.
and almost to the date.
Okay, all right. Also, congratulations to DuBois, who just got announced that he was elected as a member of the National Academy of Sciences. So congratulations for that. So I wanted to have a conversation about academic administration today. That's one of the topics we haven't covered. So we cover a lot of data science um, topics in these Zoominars. So I thought you'd be a great person to talk to us about that. So I know that it's not. I should give a little bit of a history before I start asking questions about biostatistics and schools of public health, because not all our listeners are statisticians. So there's a long tradition of biostats departments of being in the schools of public health. Although you see many of us working on things like brain imaging and genomics uh, and things that aren't necessarily connected to public health directly. Um, it did start with vital statistics and observational studies related to epidemiology, then clinical trials. So the natural place for a biostatistics department, which originally we had other names like biometrics and other names that we don't hear anymore. They were there and they just stay there, and they've been, and most biostatistics department where the data science contingency of the statistics world mostly lives in academia, because we actually care about problems and work with data more than doing math. It's just the way it's been, so Harvard, Michigan, Emory, I think also UW, they're all the biostat departments are in schools of public health. So my first question is, first, the observation that in schools of public health, we rarely see statisticians becoming deans. And I want to ask you if you agree with that. Can you think of others? I know there's a few others that I know. Nick Jewell was provost at Berkeley.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, Rafa, for inviting me to be here with you today. Just your description of the days back when I was visiting Hopkins bring back great memories. Earlier phases of our careers. In some ways, it seems like yesterday,
Yeah.
but certainly a lot has happened since that time. So, in terms of statisticians or biostatisticians going on to become deans or other academic leaders, there are a number, not necessarily just schools of public health. So if we were to limit it to schools of public health, the number is far fewer. But as I think about people who've made the transition to sort of central administration and higher ed, a couple of examples that come to mind for me: Mark Becker is currently president at Georgia State University. Mark Becker was a faculty member while I was a graduate student here in the Department of Biostatistics at the University of Michigan School of Public Health, and he went on to become provost or dean of the School of Public Health at the University of Minnesota, and then provost at University of South Carolina, and now president at Georgia State, and served in that capacity for a number of years. A number of provosts as well. David Madigan, recently appointed provost at Northeastern University, previously was dean of Faculty of Arts and Sciences at Columbia. Marilan Miranda is provost at Notre Dame. Bob Groves, provost at Georgetown University. Monty Fuentes, provost at University of Iowa, at least former provost at University of Iowa. So a number even at president and provost level. And then at dean level, in addition to myself, the people who come to mind, Melissa Begg, a former colleague of mine at Columbia, who's now actually dean of social work at Columbia. Ron Brookmeyer, dean of of public health at UCLA. Sastry Panchula, he's dean of natural sciences at Cal State San Bernardino. Previously held a dean post at Oregon State University. Sally Morton, dean of College of Science at Virginia Tech. Rebecca Dorge, dean of College of Science at Carnegie Mellon. So these are just a few that come to mind, not at all a comprehensive list. So it takes some reflection, but upon reflecting, there are a number of people who.
Ah, that's good. I didn't know some of those. Some of those are recent. That's good.
Yep.
So so now that we've established that there's quite a few. So one of the things that I find disappointing about universities in general is that they don't use data to evaluate themselves as much as I think they should. So one example that I think is I just find it hard to believe is that we don't really keep data on the future of our students once they leave. Like how well do they do financially and happiness, and do they learn? Do they keep that knowledge? I can't do we know that they actually learn in our classes for real? Like 10 years later, they still retain that knowledge. Do you do anything like that now as dean at Michigan? Are you trying to use data in any way that wasn't used before, or do you think it's just there's a reason for not doing this as much?
Yeah. Excellent question. I share your value for use of data, and I guess it's our statistical roots that prompt that. And I agree with you. There has been a slow evolution. In some ways, though, I think it mirrors society more broadly, right? With the emergence of data science, there seems to be a reckoning by society of the value and use of data, mirrored by the capabilities of storage and retrieval and analysis, et cetera. And so in some ways, I think higher ed is also catching up, just like society more broadly. We do collect data. Some will be kind of in the traditional things that you might think of in terms of educational institutions. Some we're building resources that we'll be able to leverage a bit more. So some of the usual things that come to mind are things like course evaluations, recruiting and admissions data. The recruiting landscape is very different. It has than what it was, I think, many years ago, where many schools just kind of waited for high quality applicants to find them, and there were always more than enough applicants to fill seats. Now, I'd say we have to be much more proactive about really trying to find the best students. And when we find them at Michigan, certainly Harvard will find those same students. Johns Hopkins will find those same students. And so there's inevitably a process in trying to convince students that your institution is the right fit for them. And so we integrate data in that process of just learning more about who our applicants are, who comes here, the ones we lose, the one we lose, why we lose them, to whom do we lose them. So those sorts of things that we're starting to collect data on. Research productivity, how many grants our faculty are submitting, success rates for grants, those things can be used to think about processes that.
So you are keeping track of that?
We do keep track of all of that, and so that's of use for us at a school level. But we've also built, and this actually started before my arrival, but we actually build out dashboards that are resources for faculty and department chairs, so people can actually check their own and kind of see, their own standing in context of the department or the school. And so it's a nice resource that is available for faculty within the school. So moving toward a much more data rich environment there, how to use the data. As I think about data science and statistics, sometimes the data may not lend themselves to rigorous analysis. Sometimes they will, but in either case, it will help to provide additional sources of objective information.
Yes, that's great. I even want, it's one of the things I want to have more access to is readily available information related to success, grant success, and because one thing that a lot of people don't understand, even faculty, is that it costs quite a bit of money to apply for grants. And it's not like there's an infinite time of research administration for doing that. So we feel that pain, that you want to encourage your faculty to try to get funding, but if they're not being, if there's certain types of grants that aren't necessarily deemed a success, you might want to avoid going for that, because in the aggregate, it can be quite a burden. We have overworked grants managers and often are requesting. That's one of our main requests, to get more of them, because to keep up with the faculty putting in grants. But yeah, having a dashboard, man, I wish we could. I think we are working on that at Farber, but it would be fantastic to have that information and.
Absolutely.
Maybe tell people, don't try this, try that one instead. We're having a first question. So it comes from our department administrator, Jane Craycroft. Possible to share examples of dashboard and what tech is used?
Yeah, so I wish I had my chief operations officer here to provide some details, but the dashboards will provide information on, and we actually use it as a central process during the annual merit review system. So when faculty go through merit review, they're able to reference the dashboard. And so things on measures of productivity, publications, I mentioned grants, number of grants, dollars, number of grant submissions, that sort of activity is captured. We do departmental displays. And so you can think of, very, very basic visual displays, things like scatter plots or, bar graphs, but one can take a look at his or her standing in context of other colleagues in a department. One can look at a department relative to, to other departments in the school. And so it's a way for us to be able to determine departments that are doing, kind of an admirable job just in terms of their productivity. And then also maybe to see opportunities for departments where maybe per faculty member, so per capita, the grant productivity is a little bit lower. And sometimes that's going to be, there are reasons for that, and it won't prompt additional action, but sometimes it will. But it's hard to know until you see until you see the data and are able to evaluate and assess.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing where all of a sudden you can be completely illuminated by just a scatter plot or a bar chart of something that was right in your face, and you didn't really notice it until it was displayed in a certain way.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And one thing I'd like to add, we've had discussions with our department chairs in particular about how best to use the data, because you also don't want data in the way that data are collected, the specific metrics, the way the data are displayed, to create incentives that might not be best for an individual's career development, that might not be best for sort of the well-being of a department or a school. And so, just to give an example, things that come up all the time in terms of promotion cases, if people start playing to the number, so to speak, then that may overweigh really being more ambitious and going after that really competitive and prestigious journal where there's a lower success rate, but maybe that's the right home for particular work. So we try to use it just as an extra tool, but not be too rigid in the way that we assess.
I mean, absolutely. At the end of the day, and you should be clear, because not everybody that's listening has been in our positions, but ultimately what we want from our faculty is that they have the time to think deep thoughts and to write great ideas down and share it with everybody, to teach great classes. But there's a reality as well. That's that the money doesn't go on trees, etc. So we are talking about that part of the reality, but ultimately what we are doing is trying to make it so that faculty can do that. They have time to do that, they need the funding to help get people to help them do the research, etc. But yeah, that is a great point about the incentives, because one of the incentives we already have, and this is very hard to get away from, is I find, maybe you disagree, but I find that we're going for grants too much. I think there's too because that's what gets you your IDC rates higher, the amount of money you bring in, you can ask for more space. But it does take time, and when you're writing grants, you're not necessarily, sometimes you are, but not necessarily thinking deep thoughts. So of course we have to get grants, but I think that maybe we want to bring it back to a place where it's a little bit less than what we're doing now. I don't know if you agree with that.
Rafa, I think you hit a really, really, really important point, and something I've thought about just in my time in administrative positions. At different institutions, because how the institutions are structured, how they function, just in terms of like the underlying budget model plays into this. And at Michigan, one of the things that I appreciate, maybe even that my colleagues here who have not spent time at other institutions might not fully appreciate, but we have a hard money model here at the University of Michigan, where faculty are hired, they will receive within their departments some teaching assignments, and that constitutes their pay. And so we at the University of Michigan, we still have lots of grant activity per capita. We're the have the highest grant expenditures on the University of Michigan campus. So we still arrive at a place where there's significant productivity, but it allows individual faculty to be a little bit more judicious about what opportunities they go after, because they're in line with their overall research programs, and it makes sense to go after those. Whereas sometimes, as a function of being in a different model, the soft money model, where faculty member is responsible for raising X% of salary, you can get locked into that cycle of writing grants, writing the next grant because there's a pressing need to fill a certain percentage of your effort. And I worry about the adverse impacts of that, just in terms of on one's scholarship and more broadly on science, right? We want, as you mentioned earlier, I think we're all best served if people have the opportunity to reflect and go after the big ideas. And so the degree to which the system at a university might prompt people to move one direction or another is really, really important, and I think a privilege of the structure here at the University of Michigan.
So I was going to ask you about that. I know that about Michigan School of Public Health. I don't know all the systems, but of the ones I know, it's the only one that has hard money of the schools of public health. What's the history behind that? How did that happen?
Yeah, so I think if we look back further, and still certainly in arts and sciences, I think many universities kind of grew out of a hard money system, and health sciences or medical systems or health affairs, whatever sort of they're described at a university. I think there was a move toward a different model, and a soft money model that does have some benefits, in particular, a benefit of targeting growth. One can argue that there are some productivity benefits. Maybe it's true, but again, my experience here at Michigan is that our faculty are also very productive, and so we kind of get to the same place on the productivity metric. But in terms of growth, the soft money environment, and I'll go rush to, to your respective deans, but if a case can be made that there's funding, or if someone has a strong history of securing grants to support salary, you can just go ahead and recruit. Whereas if there's a long,
you get them for free, you get them. The dean gets them for free.
For free, essentially. That's right. A very small percentage is the institution ultimately responsible for. Whereas in a hard money environment, where you are making a commitment that's not just based on the current picture, but it's a long-term commitment, you want to make sure that the head count is sort of balanced, and that's something that we have to be a little bit more careful about how we grow. So there are benefits to a soft money environment as well, but on a whole, I think there are significant merits to having a hard money, and we are unique in that regard, as most other departments that exist within schools of public health do operate on the soft money model.
And so you have state money then. It comes from the state, because otherwise there's no other place it could come from.
Yeah, so it's interesting. We do have state money. The University of Michigan, of course, is a public school. But we're unlike many other public schools where the allocation that we get from the state is limited. And quite frankly, at the university level, the proceeds of our endowment surpass the funding that we get from the state every year. And so we're a public university, but not supported in the same direct way that many other of our sort of public peers are with respect to state appropriations. And so that is a portion of it. Some of it will be just sort of tied to enrollment and those sorts of things.
So you teach undergrads then?
We do teach undergrads, a relatively recent move within the School of Public Health, and have really excited about the undergraduate program here. We accept students not as freshmen, but their last 2 years. So they will transfer to the School of Public Health from some other school or college at the university. I
see, yeah. Yeah, so that, just so everybody listening understands why I'm asking this question, is because in most universities, the hard money, the money you don't have to get grants for, usually comes from students paying tuition and then endowment, which Harvard College has a lot of both those things, but the School of Public Health has none of it. They have a master's program that gets them some money, but it's really not that much. So so the Harvard School of Public Health gets none of the money that undergrads pay, or in the case of Michigan, it would be the state paying some of that because it's subsidized. So that's quite a different model that DuBois is describing for the School of Public Health. Yeah. Interesting. So on a related note, but no, so actually you didn't quite answer my question, because I was trying to figure out, is this always been like this? Is like a historic thing, some decision that was made a long time ago and it's just been kept that way? That's right.
It's historic. We just haven't moved to the new system that many other schools have.
Well, but some of the schools didn't move. They started, I think, maybe not, but I think some of them started that way because the president, so I'm putting myself in the position of the president of the university, I see the opportunity to get NIH grants for not much cost, because there's not like a bunch of labs or not necessarily, right? It's not like a school of medicine. So you just give them a building and say, go for it, go get grants for me. I'm not going to give you any money. You
Sure.
get it yourself, right? I think that's how a lot of them started, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
Sure. Certainly the newer schools of public health have emerged in that landscape. Back in the 1940s, when schools of public health began to come on the scene. We're 1941 at Michigan. We were Johns Hopkins, of course, was the first. Columbia, Harvard, soon to follow. Michigan was like in that next wave. So I don't know the landscape more broadly during that time, to be able to speak directly to the original business models, but certainly across higher ed, many schools and colleges have still remained on a hard money system, and so the structure at Michigan in public health just maps onto that history more so than more of a medical model.
Okay, so this is related to this conversation, but I want to transition to education, something I think a lot about these days. So I remember one of the conversations we had when you were chair was related to the start of data science and the fact that deans and others were seeing the possibility of increasing revenue by starting master's programs. And you were the chair of the biostat department, and I was in a biostat department. And I was hearing these conversations. Everybody was starting a program because they thought, well, we can just get a couple of $1 million with no extra cost. But you were not on that same boat, which I thought was interesting, and actually you convinced me of the fact that it wasn't necessarily a good idea to just go after this money, because it is actually work. And then as I thought about it more, I also think it's not just that it's work, it's that if we're really not going to invest in this, if we're just going to start a master's and just put together classes that already are here, we're not, that seems unfair to the students. And, I don't know what you ended up doing. I know it seems like you were under some pressure to start one and you were maybe resisting it. Now you're on the other side. So I don't know if you're telling your chair to start one, but I want to hear what you think about all this now after what, I don't know, what it is, 5-10 years thinking about it.
Sure. As I recall that situation and some of the factors being considered, and I'd say much like the outlook that I have now, I try to focus on the what separately from the resource question that ultimately you have to come to, and you have to work that out in order for things to be viable. But in terms of evaluating the opportunity, I try to just focus first on the what. And so for data science, right, we have seen, even at that time, there was evolution in the field more broadly, and a clear training need. And I think that biostatistics departments certainly had a central role to play in that training, not necessarily exclusively the only place that people could be trained, but important one. And so, so is that sort of on the one hand.
Let me say this, for not everybody knows this, but we were doing data science already. We were asking questions or having collaborators ask questions and using data to answer them, using computing, all that stuff. We were already doing that. And at the same time, computer science and statistics department weren't necessarily doing that, right? They were, writing math papers.
Yeah, that's right. So, so there was this shift in the field more broadly. I saw a need in terms of student demand, just what was going to be expected of graduates once they enter the workforce, and and then the expertise of our faculty, to your point, to be able to do it. So there were things that automatically lined up for me that gave merit to the idea. The question there then that you arrive at, you look around and everyone is completely busy, saturated with other activity, and other important activity and doing a great job at it, right? And so the question then is, well, how does this fit in? If this is something we're going to do, how does it fit in? And then, questions about, well, what can make it sustainable? And those are kind of the underlying business model questions of resources, et cetera. So
can I interrupt you just to tell you that I don't feel that other necessarily administrators realize what this thing that to you and I is obvious, that there's no more hours in a day, but go ahead. It's
sure.
just, I mean, that seems like it's obvious, but it doesn't seem like everybody realizes that. But yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Sure. No, absolutely. Absolutely. So, so that was, I felt like where we were as a department during that time. And then thinking about not only trade-offs in terms of time for faculty and staff, but also maybe even the trade-off in terms of students in our own graduate program. So if we were going to increase data science offerings, for whom? Does that expand opportunities for students who are already in our programs or who would otherwise be coming anyway? Are we now expanding the types of students who we admit, or are we thinking about maybe even other students in other departments, in other departments in public health, other departments around the university who have an interest and have a need. And so those are the sort of the complicated questions that then, questions of like funds flow and, would it ultimately be sustainable the way a university budget model works? So that's sort of what I recall at the time, and ultimately, and really resting on efforts by many faculty in the department, that there was movement in that direction, and increasing some data science offerings within the departments, having a specific track ultimately identified.
Interesting. You know what's interesting? I've seen a lot of computer science departments start data science courses, and through the years I've seen them slowly turn into a Biostat 101 course taught with Python. It's like eventually they get here. So that's interesting, and I mean, you see it everywhere. You see that kind of tension everywhere. All right. So now we stay on the topic of teaching. That another one of the things I think a lot about when it comes to universities, especially in soft money institution, is the fact that teaching, and this also is somewhat true in hard money places, where because research is such a big focus when it comes to promotion, faculty view teaching as a burden. Not everybody, but it sometimes is, because it doesn't help you with promotion. And I think that's a problem, especially for our students. And one possibility is, and this is especially true in soft money institutions, is that maybe we should have a division of labor where we have faculty that teach and have faculty that do research. You could have faculty that do both, but maybe it's time for us to start thinking of that, of investing in that way. And I've seen this as you were talking about data science programs and you're the faculty putting the effort. I have seen in hard money institutions with a lot of resources that they actually hire people. They sometimes hire team that like 5 people. They're starting a master's program. That means we have to hire 5 people, 2 to teach, 1 to the kind of wrangle them, and 1 for the admin, and 1 for like the overseeing everything. I mean, not all of them 100% FTEs, but they do make that investment. And I'm wondering if in your school it's easier because you actually pay people to teach. But I wonder if that's something that's in the future of our field, where we're going to look for talented teachers to do the teaching, and then we'll let the talented researchers do the research. And of course, those that can do both can do both.
Yeah, it's a great question. In the way you framed it, there's sort of systematic components of your question in terms of like, what's the best organizational design to accomplish a mission. Where I land on this, Rafa, is really keeping in mind, there's one principle that I'll point to, I think, that overrides all departments in the School of Public Health, and perhaps even extending outside. Another one, though, is kind of near and dear just to my experience as a biostatistician. The first one that's very general is, I think there will be some movement in the direction that you mentioned. To some degree, I think we've already started to see some movement. The pressures are less here in my experience at the University of Michigan, but we've also had to make a move in that direction, and now for specific newly launched programs, and I'll comment on that as well if I can keep track of all of my ideas. But ultimately, I think many students are interested in coming to learn from experts. And how do we define experts? Some experts are going to be sort of experts in terms of pedagogy and will provide a terrific learning experience for the students. Some experts will be viewed as experts based on the research that they do, right? And then, to me, I don't want to completely divide and limit access to students to come and have to be able to learn from people who they sort of aspire to follow a research path. So I'd like to have some blending always present, but some people who may be more heavily weighted to teaching, some people who may be more heavily weighted to research. Now kind of building on that, for specific to biostatistics, most biostatisticians who I know, and many people working in data science, they have a lot to offer. And they sometimes it spans not only education and research, but even within research, sometimes it's methodological research and more collaborative research. And so not to limit how people contribute, I think I like the idea of having some flexibility that, again, even if you're hired primarily to function in one role, that you're able to use your skills and pursue your interest in other ways. So ultimately that leads me to land at least at an organizational level, by design, not to have a complete division of labor. We have, with that said, we have launched, I mentioned the undergraduate program that we launched. We've also launched a completely online Master of Public Health degree that requires a little bit different skill set than what many of us have acquired with our in-person instruction. And how do you just on the dime pivot and ramp up an entire online degree program. And so our faculty have been great.
Everybody listening, thinking of doing online programs, it takes much more time to create an online course than to create a presential course. And it's the fact that, so I've built a few of those, and the fact that one of the problems is that because this is recorded for prosperity, it has to be perfect. You can't improvise. But yeah, sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
Yeah, no worries at all. No worries at all. So, our faculty have been great and very generous, and I'll say courageous about entering into a space of vulnerability. You're a decorated senior faculty member, really good at your research, really good, and at a format of teaching that now we ask you to go stand in front of a camera and teach, and guess what, you have made some mistakes and you have to go back and re-record. And so our faculty have been really good about that. But we also have invested in bringing in some additional faculty who focus a large portion of their efforts on developing that kind of course content, in addition to other support like instructional design, et cetera.
And what track are they in, and how do they get promoted? Yeah,
so at Michigan, we have something called a clinical track. And, so it nominally, you can think of it kind of in a medical center or health sciences context. We can think of it as a track for dentistry, nursing, medicine, but the way it's operationalized here in the School of Public Health is it allows those faculty to devote a significant portion of their time to teaching efforts.
That's good. Yeah, no, I'm going to go back to your answer to the division of labor, which is great, because I 100% agree. It's not that easy, because part of the reason that students come to these, best universities in the world is because they want to learn from people who are current in everything as much as possible. And it really is research. The best way to keep current mostly is by having to do research. You have to stay current. Right? There's just you can't survive otherwise. Well, if you're just teaching, you could, if you're dedicated, you'll keep up, but there's more of a risk of slipping and sticking to what's worked for the past 10 years and just teaching that over and over. No, that's right. I mean, and in fact, that's how it all started, right? That's why universities took on research and teaching, and it's because of that fact. So it is a little risky to move away from that. But I like that I like the model you described, where there's flexibility, and you do bring some people for it, and give people the choice. I think that's probably what's going to work ultimately.
That's right. That's right. And there's a broader aspect that you alluded to, it transcends kind of an institution specific issue. And that's like, how are these things regarded when it comes time for promotion and tenure? And, institutions can develop their own standards, but at the end of the day, we also will write for external letters from other colleagues, and we can try to guide them in terms of what we value as an institution. But many times people superimpose norms from their own experiences or institutions, and so we do have to find ways to continue to reward and value efforts within the classroom.
Yeah, and innovation, because right now there's a lot of innovation occurring in education. It's not just teaching calculus.
Yep.
So that there is a difference between teaching calculus and developing a data science course.
Absolutely.
Those are two very different activities. All right, well, we're out of time, but I'll give you one more opportunity to give us any final words of wisdom to our data science audience. And if you have any thoughts on, people that want to become academic leaders, please let us know what you think.
Yeah. So, on the topic of academic leadership, at the outset, I listed a number of statisticians who have gone into leadership positions. And I think, people who work in areas of data science or statistics or biostatistics, there's a lot that we have to offer. I think there's a kind of an analytic problem-solving approach, ability to take complex issues, frame them, determine what data are feasible, synthesize the data appropriately, and try to determine conclusions. The role that we play on collaborative teams, I think there's a lot that we have to offer that we take for granted.
And we understand uncertainty. Don't forget that one.
Absolutely.
That's a huge one, man. The people who are certain about everything are not good administrators.
Absolutely. There's constant uncertainty that you just have to have a comfort level with, in understanding that it's there, and will be present while making decisions. So I would just encourage listeners, that it's academic leadership's not for everyone, but for those of you who are so inclined, to start, talking to people who are in positions, trying to learn a little bit more about their experiences, things that they like or don't or dislike, things that they had to spend a lot of time learning. We don't do a good enough job training and preparing leaders. And actually, something I'm trying to do here at Michigan is to provide opportunities for faculty to have some leadership experiences before fully committing, and it's something that I think for those of you who are inclined will contribute just to your pathway, your preparation. And then even if you decide ultimately not to, I think it broadens awareness and sort of helps people to enhance how they contribute from wherever they are. And you don't always need a title for leadership opportunities. And so you can contribute to leadership in a number of ways.
Yeah, telling people how things work. is always a good quality. All right, DuBois. Well, thanks so much for taking time off your busy schedule to talk to us, and congratulations once again on your election.
Terrific.
And hopefully I'll see you soon in person.
Terrific. Absolutely. Great talking to you. We'll certainly look forward to catching up in person at a future meeting.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Thank you for joining.